The Silent Blade Rebellion complete, Edo period epoch. Close your eyes and drift into the world of 1720, when the Tokugawa peace has lasted for over a century. Yet beneath the surface of prosperity and order, shadows gather like storm clouds over Mount Fuji. This is the tale of 5 souls whose destinies will intertwine through one extraordinary autumn, when duty clashes with conscience, tradition wars with innovation, and the very foundations of the samurai code face their greatest test. Welcome to the age of the Silent Blade Rebellion. You are Takeda Shinsuke, and the morning fog rises from the Arakawa River, like ancestral spirits seeking vengeance as you kneel in the private garden of your modest estate in Edo's samurai quarter. Your katana balanced across your thighs, while cherry blossom petals from the previous spring's glory lie scattered on the weathered stone like fragments of broken promises. The weight of your ancestors' expectations presses upon your shoulders heavier than the ceremonial armor that hangs untouched in your family shrine, while the silence of peacetime echoes more ominously than any war cry ever could through the chambers of your increasingly restless heart. 15 years have passed since you last drew your blade in earnest combat, when the final echoes of resistance to Tokugawa rule were silenced in the mountains of Kai province. Yet the muscle memory remains sharp as winter steel, while your spirit grows soft from disuse, like a weapon left too long in its scabbard by your position as a minor retainer to the Matsudra clan provides. Comfortable existence, but little opportunity for the glorious death that your grandfather promised would be your inheritance, leaving you to navigate the treacherous waters of bureaucratic administration, where political maneuvering has replaced martial prowess as the path to advancement. The streets of Edo stretch before you like arteries of a sleeping giant as you make your way through the samurai quarter toward the castle, passing beneath wooden gates whose guardian spirits have grown fat and lazy from decades without war. The morning air carries the mingled scents of cooking rice, incense from family shrines, and the faint metallic tang of swords that rust from disuse in their scabbard. Children's laughter echoes from courtyards where young samurai practice with wooden swords, their movements precise but lacking the desperate intensity that comes from knowing that tomorrow might bring real combat. Your fellow retainers nod respectfully as you pass, their faces bearing the same expression of quiet desperation that you see reflected in every polished surface. Men whose grandfathers conquered provinces, but who themselves cannot conquer the tedium of ledger books and administrative reports. The morning conferences at Matsudra Mansion have become exercises in collective futility, where warriors trained for decisive action debate the proper formatting of rice production reports, while their souls slowly strangle on bureaucratic minutiae. The letter that arrived with yesterday's messenger burns in your sleeve pocket like a hidden flame, its contents promising either salvation or destruction, depending upon how you choose to respond to its revelations. Your childhood friend, Watanabe Jiro, now serving as a Yuriki under the Machi-Bugio of Osaka, writes of corruption so systematic and pervasive that it threatens the very foundations of Tokugawa rule. Foreign traders smuggle prohibited goods through ports that should be sealed against outside contamination, while government officials embezzle funds meant for coastal defense and flood control. Most disturbing are reports of samurai abandoning their class obligations to pursue commercial activities, selling their honor for merchant gold, while the social order crumbles like a wall eaten by termites. Your morning ritual begins in the darkness, before temple bells announce the day's beginning, when shadows dance between carefully pruned pine trees and the scent of incense from your family shrine mingles with the distant aroma of miso soup from servant quarters. The forms flow through your body like prayers made manifest as your practiced sword cuts silent arcs through air heavy with dew and the weight of tradition. Each movement a conversation with ghosts whose expectations shape every breath you draw. In this life that feels increasingly distant from the warrior ideal that gave your existence meaning. The meditation that follows takes place before the altar where your father's ashes rest beside his katana, the blade that served 3 generations of Takeda warriors before peace rendered such service obsolete. Your father died not in glorious battle but from a wasting disease, his final words expressing regret that he could not pass on the chance for honorable death that his own father had given him. The prayers that you whisper into the pre-dawn silence seek guidance for understanding how honor can be preserved when circumstances no longer provide opportunities for its traditional expression, while the incense smoke carries hopes that your ancestors will forgive the compromises that survival in this new world increasingly demands. Meanwhile, in Edo's bustling textile quarter, where the sound of looms creates a rhythm like countless wooden hearts beating in unison, you are Okamoto, Yuki, and the silk threads between your fingers catch the morning light streaming through paper screens of your workshop, their iridescent beauty concealing the deadly secrets that your nimble hands weave into patterns that appear decorative to casual observers while serving as coded communications for the resistance network that spans Japan like an invisible web of shared purpose and desperate hope. Your workshop occupies the 3rd floor of a building that seems to lean against its neighbors for support, much like the residents of this crowded district who rely upon each other for survival in a city that grows larger and more impersonal with each passing year. The narrow streets below teem with activity as merchants call out their wares. Children dodge between ox carts loaded with goods from distant provinces, and the occasional samurai passes through on official business, his presence creating ripples of bowed heads and hastily averted eyes that mark the invisible boundaries of social hierarchy. The morning light reveals details that darkness conceals. The careful way your fellow textile workers avoid looking directly at certain customers. The subtle hand signals that pass between shop owners when particular officials approach. The seemingly random patterns of closed shutters that actually communicate information about the movements of Bakufu agents. This district has developed its own language of resistance, spoken in glances and gestures, rather than words that could be overheard by unfriendly ears. Your journey from orphaned peasant girl to master weaver began during the terrible famine of Koho 17, when starvation drove your family from their mountain village toward the great city, whose promise of opportunity masked realities harsher than mountain winters. The memory of your younger brother's death from hunger still haunts your dreams, his small hand growing cold in yours as the ox cart bumped along roads littered with the bodies of those who had attempted the same desperate journey but lacked the strength to complete it. The textile guild master who purchased your indenture contract proved kinder than most such arrangements typically provide, teaching you not only the technical skills of weaving, but also the subtle arts of reading, customize true intentions behind their spoken words. Old Master Kojima had lost his own daughter to the same famine that orphaned you, and in teaching you his craft, he found a way to honor her memory, while you found a father figure whose gruff affection gradually healed wounds that starvation and loss had carved into your young heart. The workshop where you now practice your dual crafts serves multiple functions that customers never suspect. The looms, whose operation provides your livelihood, also function as communication devices, whose patterns carry messages between resistance cells, while the silk threads that create beautiful fabrics simultaneously with networks of information and coordination. B. Traditional designs that wealthy clients commission often contain hidden elements. A particular shade of blue that indicates message received. A subtle variation in floral motifs that means danger approaching. Geometric patterns that provide map coordinates for secret meetings. Your position as coordinator for the underground movement, known as the Cage no Tachi, developed gradually through contact with other artisans and merchants whose prosperity depends upon freedom from excessive governmental interference. The organization includes displaced farmers driven from their land by new taxation policies that leave families with insufficient rice for survival. Masterless samurai whose services are no longer required by a government that prizes administrative efficiency over martial virtue. Buddhist monks whose temple autonomy faces systematic erosion through regulations that transform spiritual communities into extensions of state bureaucracy. And even certain court nobles whose traditional privileges have been curtailed by military pragmatism that recognizes no authority except efficient governance. The intelligence network that you maintain operates through the commercial relationships that sustain Edo's economy, with messages concealed in textile shipments, while meetings take place in workshops and market stalls, where business conversations provide perfect camouflage for planning resistance activities. Your fellow weavers, dyers, and seamstresses possess capabilities for information gathering and transmission that trained agents could never match, while their mobility throughout the city enables coordination between separated elements of the poor organization that official surveillance cannot penetrate. Across the city, in the scholarly quarter, where autumn leaves drift like burning pages between academic buildings, you are Hayashi, and the morning light filters through the wooden lattice of your private study in the Confucian Academy where young samurai learn classical texts that should guide their understanding of proper governance. Yet, the wisdom of ancient sages seems increasingly inadequate for addressing challenges that their world never anticipated. The scrolls that line your study walls contain centuries of accumulated wisdom about virtue, duty, and the proper relationship between ruler and subject. But their elegant theories provide little guidance for situations where the rulers themselves violate the principles that legitimize their authority. Your students arrive each morning with minds shaped by political realities that classical education struggles to address. Their questions revealing sophisticated understanding of current events that often surpasses their knowledge of historical precedent. Young Matsudra Yoshimune asks why Confucian teachings about benevolent governance seem incompatible with policies that increase taxation while reducing services to common people. Hosokawa Tadatoshi wonders how traditional loyalty obligations ply when superiors command actions that violate moral principles. These questions pierce to the heart of contradictions that your scholarly training never prepared you to resolve. The academy itself reflects the tensions between traditional learning and contemporary pressures. Its ancient architecture housing modern anxieties, while its peaceful gardens provide refuge from a world that increasingly values practical utility over contemplative wisdom. The library where you conduct your research contains texts that document the historical foundations of Tokugawa rule, alongside contemporary reports that reveal systematic deviation from constitutional principles that originally justified military governance. Your scholarly journey began with disappointment when physical limitations prevented the military career that family tradition demanded. Yet the compensation of intellectual pursuits proved more satisfying than anyone anticipated, while creating expertise that serves purposes your martial ancestors could never have imagined. The years spent studying Chinese classics alongside Japanese historical texts provided foundation for understanding how societies adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining essential characteristics that define their cultural identity. But they also revealed patterns of governmental decay that current developments seem to replicate with disturbing precision. The secret meetings that take place in your study after academy hours bring together intellectuals whose scholarly credentials provide protection for activities that might otherwise attract official suspicion. The discussions that develop during these gatherings range from abstract philosophical questions to practical analysis of current political developments. While the participants include not only fellow scholars, but also certain government officials, whose positions enable access to information about policy debates within the highest levels of administration. Yamamoto Sunitomo, a former Nabeshima retainer who now teaches military history, brings insights about the psychological effects of prolonged peace on samurai morale and institutional effectiveness. His observations about the gradual transformation of warrior culture into bureaucratic careerism provide theoretical framework for understanding current political problems, while his contacts within various Han administrations reveal similar patterns. Day of Decay throughout Japan. Og. Usarai. whose heterodox interpretations of Confucian doctrine challenge orthodox assumptions about governance and social organization, contributes analysis that legitimizes resistance to governmental policies that violate constitutional principles. His scholarship demonstrates that loyalty to principles should take precedence over obedience to particular authorities when those authorities betray their fundamental obligations to promote social welfare and moral development. In the floating world of Yoshiwara, where night blooms eternal in chambers lit by colored lanterns and perfumed with incense that masks the scent of desperation, you are Asagao, and the silk screens of your chamber filter moonlight into patterns that dance across writing materials where your elegant calligraphy transforms intelligence reports into classical poetry whose artistic beauty conceals information that could topple governments if properly interpreted by those who possess the cultural knowledge necessary for understanding coded communications. Your chamber occupies the top floor of the Hanafuji Tea House, whose reputation for refined entertainment attracts clients from the highest levels of government and commerce. The view from your window encompasses much of Yoshiwara's elaborate architecture, with its maze of wooden buildings connected by covered walkways that enable discreet movement between establishments, while creating opportunities for surveillance that few customers suspect. The district operates according to its own rules, separate from the rigid social hierarchies that govern life outside its walls. Yet its apparent freedom conceals surveillance networks that rival those of the Bakufu itself. Be evening entertainments that provide your primary opportunities for intelligence. Gathering involves ceremonies of pleasure that transformed physical desire into artistic performance, requiring extensive cultural education and psychological sophistication. The tea ceremony that begins each evening creates an atmosphere of refined intimacy while providing time for psychological assessment of clients, whose behavioral patterns reveal information about their personal vulnerabilities, political connections, and access to sensitive information. Your training in classical poetry enables conversations that operate on multiple levels simultaneously, with surface discussions of seasonal imagery and literary allusions, concealing changes of political intelligence and strategic planning. The musical performances that you provide create emotional atmosphere, while the sounds of shamisen and koto mask conversations that would be dangerous if overheard by hostile ears. Your knowledge of traditional dance forms provides opportunities for physical communication through gestures whose meanings remain invisible to observers, lacking proper cultural background. The transformation from country maiden to sophisticated entertainer began with tragedy when your village was destroyed by flooding that resulted from government neglect of irrigation infrastructure that previous generations had maintained as sacred trust between rulers and subjects. The disaster that claimed your family and forced your survival choices occurred not from natural causes, but from systematic corruption that diverted flood control funds to private projects, while leaving common people vulnerable to preventable catastrophes. Your secret role as intelligence coordinator for operations within Yoshiwara exploits the unique social dynamics of the pleasure quarter. where apparent frivolity provides perfect concealment for activities that serve purposes far removed from entertainment. Your fellow courtesans and geisha possess capabilities for psychological manipulation and information extraction that trained agents could never match, while their access to powerful men creates opportunities for gathering intelligence and exercising influence that conventional political channels cannot provide. The network of contacts that your position enables extends throughout Japanese society, connecting court nobles seeking to restore aristocratic influence with wealthy merchants pursuing commercial freedom from restrictive regulations, displaced samurai whose frustrations with peaceful administration create opportunities for recruitment to resistance causes, and religious leaders whose spiritual authority provides moral justification for opposition to systematic oppression. The relationships that develop through professional activities create bonds based on shared interests rather than formal obligations, while the intimate knowledge that you possess about personal weaknesses provides leverage for ensuring cooperation when circumstances require decisive action. Finally, in the shadows between districts where honest citizens fear to venture after dark, you are Ishida Saburo, and the darkness before dawn conceals your movement through Eidos' maze of back alleys as you return from another night's work gathering intelligence for the Shadow Blades. Your training in the ancient arts of stealth and deception enabling passage through the city's complex geography without detection by patrols, whose increasing frequency suggests growing official awareness of resistance activities that threaten governmental stability. Your workshop in the metalworking quarter provides legitimate cover for activities that require specialized equipment and unusual skills, while its location at the intersection of multiple districts enables observation of commercial and official activities that often conceal illegal operations, requiring investigation. The forge, where you create beautiful sword fittings and household implements, during daylight hours transforms into a manufacturing center for lockpicks, climbing equipment, and other devices whose existence would be difficult to explain if discovered. During official inspections, the narrow streets surrounding your workshop teem with the energy of Edo's commercial heart, where merchants from throughout Japan gather to trade goods that sustain the city's enormous population. The early morning hours before most citizens wake provide opportunities for movement that daylight surveillance would prevent, while the maze of connecting alleys and rooftops creates transportation routes that official patrols cannot effectively monitor despite their best efforts to maintain security. Your fall from respectable samurai status to professional spy began with your lord's death during a succession dispute that the Bakufu resolved through methods that violated traditional principles of family autonomy, leaving you without position or purpose in a society that increasingly values administrative efficiency over personal loyalty. The investigation that you conducted into the circumstances of his death revealed systematic corruption within the Bakafa's judicial system, where decisions were purchased rather than based on evidence or legal precedent. The skills that you developed during years of military service proved adaptable to activities that honor required you to pursue, despite their departure from conventional samurai occupations. Your knowledge of castle architecture, guard procedures, and administrative practices provides access to governmental facilities that contain evidence of corruption and abuse, while your ability to assume various identities enables infiltration of criminal organizations whose activities threaten social stability through cooperation with corrupt officials. The training that enables your effectiveness as an intelligence operative combines traditional martial arts with techniques learned from professional criminals whose expertise in stealth and deception proves invaluable for activities that samurai education never anticipated. Old Hanzo, a former eager ninja who survived the purges that eliminated most practitioners of his art, taught you methods for moving unseen through urban environments, while your own military background provided foundation for tactical planning, dive, and risk assessment that criminal training alone could never provide. The intelligence reports that you compile from direct observation and infiltration provide the Shadow Blades with detailed understanding of governmental responses to resistance activities, while revealing corruption within the Bakufu administration that could be exploited to create internal conflicts among potential enemies. Your analysis of security procedures enables planning of operations that maximize success while minimizing risk of exposure, while your contacts within various criminal organizations provide early warning of official investigations that threaten resistance networks. The autumn morning, when these 5 paths converge, brings crimson maple leaves drifting through Edo's streets like drops of blood shed by martyrs, to causes that history will either celebrate or condemn, depending upon the outcome of events now beginning to unfold. The meeting that unites separate resistance efforts takes place in the hidden chamber beneath Yuki's textile workshop, where shadows cast by oil lamps create shifting patterns on walls lined with silk that conceals weapons and documents whose discovery would provide evidence for treason charges against everyone present. The chamber itself represents months of careful preparation, its existence unknown even to the workers in the shop above, while its construction required coordination between trusted craftsmen whose loyalty to the resistance cause enabled creation of this sanctuary beneath the very heart of Edo's commercial district. By the entrance, concealed behind a false wall that appears to support the building's main loom, opens only to pressure applied in a specific sequence that mimics the rhythm of traditional weaving patterns. Shinsuke arrives first, his samurai bearing unmistakable despite civilian clothing that conceals the short sword whose presence violates regulations governing weapons in commercial districts. The investigation that brought him into contact with the Shadow Blades revealed corruption that extends far beyond administrative misconduct to encompass systematic subversion of policies that maintain social order, while his military experience provides tactical capabilities that resistance activities desperately need. His face bears the drawn look of a man who has discovered that everything he believed about honor and duty requires re-examination in light of circumstances that traditional training never anticipated. The evidence from Osaka confirms our worst fears. He begins without preambles, his voice carrying the controlled tension of someone who has learned to discuss treason as casually as weather reports. The corruption is not merely widespread, it is systematic. Foreign merchants are paying bribes that exceed the annual rice production of entire domains, while the officials who should be protecting our borders compete for opportunities to facilitate prohibited trade. The social order is not merely bending under pressure, it is being deliberately undermined by those sworn to protect it. Yuki emerges from the shadows like a ghost given substance, her movements silent despite the wooden floor that normally announces every footstep with creaks and groans that serve as natural alarm system for the workshop above. Her textile workers' clothing conceals weapons, whose presence would surprise those who know her only as an artisan whose delicate hands create beautiful fabrics, while her expression reveals the careful balance between determination and fear that characterizes those who have chosen to risk everything for causes larger than personal survival. The communication network is fully operational. She reports while spreading coded textile samples across the chamber's central table. Messages are moving between cells in 12 different districts, while our contacts in other cities confirm similar organizations throughout Japan. The Bakufu suspects coordinated resistance, but cannot identify the communication methods that enable our coordination. However, increased surveillance suggests that official awareness is growing faster than we anticipated. Gentaro descends through the concealed entrance with scholarly precision, his movements careful and deliberate, while his eyes quickly assess the security arrangements that protect this gathering. The scrolls that he carries contain analysis of constitutional precedents that could provide legal justification for resistance activities, while his contacts within the academic community enable recruitment of intellectuals whose influence shapes public opinion through their teaching and writing. The historical analysis is complete, he announces while unrolling documents whose elegant calligraphy conceals revolutionary implications. The current Bakufu policies violate fundamental constitutional principles that originally legitimized Tokugawa rule. We have legal precedent for resistance based on Confucian doctrine, historical examples of legitimate opposition to governmental abuse, and philosophical framework that distinguishes between loyalty to principles and obedience. Two particular authorities who betray their fundamental obligations. Asagao appears last, her approach so silent that even Saburo's trained senses fail to detect her arrival, until she speaks from a corner where shadows seemed empty moments before. Her courtesan's elaborate kimono creates visual distraction while concealing the practical advantages that her profession provides for gathering intelligence and manipulating powerful men whose decisions affect resistance activities. The fan that she carries bears seasonal decorations whose subtle variations communicate authentication codes that verify her identity to other resistance members. The intelligence from Yoshiwara reveals governmental planning that threatens all resistance networks. She begins with the directness that characterizes those who have learned to discuss life and death matters while maintaining appearance of Casual conversation. Senior officials are coordinating systematic investigations designed to identify and eliminate organized opposition throughout Japan. They know about the communication networks. They suspect the existence of coordination between distant cells, and they have identified specific individuals whose activities threaten official policies. Saburo materializes from concealment behind textile machinery, with the fluid grace that years of ninja training have made instinctive. His appearance so sudden that even experienced conspirators start with surprise before recognizing the familiar figure whose intelligence gathering enables their coordination. The tools that he carries include specialized equipment for infiltration and surveillance, alongside conventional weapons whose presence provides reassurance, despite the knowledge that discovery would make armed resistance futile against governmental force. The infiltration of Bakufu headquarters confirms systematic counterintelligence operations targeting resistance activities. He reports while producing documents whose official seals verify their authenticity. They have identified communication pattern. They know about coordination between different resistance groups, and they possess detailed information about specific individuals whose involvement threatens their security. The trap is closing faster than we anticipated, while our window for effective action grows smaller with each passing day. The documents that spread across the chamber's floor create a comprehensive picture of corruption, incompetence, and systematic abuse that threatens Japan's political stability, while revealing opportunities for resistance that could either restore legitimate governance or destroy the social order entirely. The evidence includes financial records showing embezzlement from public works projects that leave common people vulnerable to preventable disasters. Correspondence revealing coordination between corrupt officials and foreign merchants whose activities undermine isolation policies, and strategic documents outlining plans for increased governmental control over commercial and cultural activities that would eliminate the freedoms that enable resistance operations. The Osaka port corruption involves over 50 officials and more than 2 million ryo in illegal payments. Shinsuke explains, while pointing to financial records whose implications extend far beyond simple monetary theft. But the pattern shows systematic coordination between multiple government departments, foreign trading companies, and criminal organizations whose cooperation enables large-scale violations of fundamental policies. They are not merely stealing money, they are selling Japan's independence to foreign interests, while enriching themselves through betrayal of every principle that justifies their authority. The communication interceptions reveal that they know about our network structure and operational methods. Yuki adds, while displaying textile samples whose patterns encode strategic information about resistance activities. They have identified the symbolic systems that enable coordination between distant cells. They understand the commercial relationships that provide cover for our operations, and they suspect the existence of this command center. Despite our security precautions, we must assume that our next operation will encounter prepared opposition. The academic analysis provides moral and legal justification for active resistance. Gentaro contributes while unrolling scrolls whose classical quotations support revolutionary conclusions. Confucian doctrine requires resistance to rulers who violate their fundamental obligations. Japanese historical precedents legitimize opposition to governmental abuse, and Buddhist philosophy supports actions that serve collective welfare despite personal risk. We have intellectual foundation for resistance that transcends mere rebellion or criminal conspiracy. The psychological profiles of key officials reveal vulnerabilities that could be exploited to create internal conflicts among our enemies. Asagao observes while arranging intelligence reports according to patterns, invisible to those lacking her professional understanding of human weaknesses. Financial desperation, sexual appetites, family obligations, and personal ambitions create opportunities for manipulation that could neutralize specific threats while creating chaos within their organization that would provide cover for our aspirations. The security analysis suggests that we have perhaps 2 weeks before systematic arrests begin. Saburo concludes while examining floor plans of government facilities whose defenses he has personally tested. Their counterintelligence operations are approaching completion while their confidence in success makes them careless about operational security. We must act immediately with maximum impact or accept that organized resistance will become impossible for the foreseeable future. The plan that emerges from hours of careful analysis and heated debate represents synthesis of 5 different approaches to resistance, each contributing essential capabilities while creating possibilities for success that individual efforts could never achieve. The strategy requires precise timing and perfect coordination, while accepting risks that could result in complete destruction of the resistance movement if their activities are discovered before achieving decisive results. We strike simultaneously at 3 targets. Shinsuke outlines while sketching tactical diagrams on silk fabric whose surface provides erasable planning medium. The financial records that document port corruption, the correspondence that reveals foreign connections, and the strategic plans that outline increased governmental control. Each target requires different approaches, while their coordination creates maximum impact that forces official response before they can complete their counterintelligence operations. My textile network provides communication capabilities for coordinating the simultaneous operations, Yuki explains, while demonstrating coding systems whose artistic appearance conceals military precision. The delivery schedules that supply shops throughout Edo create cover for positioning operatives at strategic locations, while the pattern modifications that appear to be seasonal fashion changes actually communicate timing signals that enable synchronized action despite geographical separation. The scholarly community provides intellectual framework that legitimizes the revelations while shaping public perception of events. Gentaro adds, while preparing documents whose academic authority could transform criminal conspiracy into legitimate political opposition. The analysis that accompanies leaked evidence determines whether exposures create support for reform or backlash against resistance activities, while the philosophical justification influences how other intellectuals respond to governmental retaliation. The pleasure quarter operations provide access to officials whose cooperation or neutralization determines governmental response. Asagao contributes while outlining psychological manipulation techniques whose effectiveness depends upon intimate knowledge of individual weaknesses. The timing of personal pressure coordinate with public revelations creates maximum impact, while the emotional atmosphere influences decision-making processes in ways that rational analysis alone could never achieve. The infiltration capabilities provide direct access to evidence, while ensuring that exposures cannot be dismissed as fabrications. Saburo concludes while examining architectural plans whose details enable planning of operations that conventional approaches could never accomplish. The physical proof obtained through penetration of secured facilities provides credibility that transforms allegations into undeniable facts, while the methods of acquisition demonstrate capabilities that force enemies to respect resistance effectiveness. The Piers operation that tests their coordination begins 3 nights later when autumn rain provides cover for movement while creating atmospheric conditions that enable Saburo's infiltration of the Osaka Trade Administration's Edo offices. The building that houses these records occupies a strategic location near the castle where security should be impenetrable. Yet the careful observation of guard routines reveals vulnerabilities that skilled infiltration can exploit during specific weather conditions that occur perhaps once each season. The approach requires crossing 3 different districts while avoiding patrols whose routes have been modified recently to counter resistance activities. Navigating rooftops whose structural integrity varies according to building age and maintenance conditions, and timing entry to coincide with guard shift changes that create brief windows of reduced surveillance. The rain that facilitates concealment also creates hazards that could prove fatal. If foot placement fails to account for slippery surfaces and unstable supporting beams, the infiltration itself demands perfect coordination between external diversions and internal movement, with Asagao's manipulation of a senior administrator creating justification for his late-night presence in the building, while Yuki's textile delivery provides cover for Saburo's initial approach to the target facility. The documents that must be photographed include not only financial records, but also correspondence whose implications require analysis that can only be conducted with time and resources that clandestine operations cannot provide. The guard rotation changes in precisely 30 minutes. Saburo whispers through communication devices that Yuki's workshop manufactured using techniques that combine traditional craftsmanship with innovative engineering. The administrator will arrive in 20 minutes while the cleaning staff. Departure creates a 15-minute window for accessing the document storage without encountering unexpected personnel. The weather conditions remain favorable, but the operational timeline requires exact adherence to planned sequences. The psychological pressure is building according to expectations. Asagao reports while maintaining intimate conversation with the official whose cooperation enables the operation. His anxiety about recent irregularities in the accounts creates willingness to work late hours that provides cover for unusual activity, while his personal financial problems make him receptive to suggestions about investigating possible embezzlement by colleagues. The emotional manipulation requires careful balance between encouraging cooperation and avoiding suspicion about ulterior motives. The communication network stands ready for immediate dissemination of evidence. Yuki confirms while monitoring signal patterns that indicate the readiness of resistance cells throughout Edo. Decoded textile patterns are in position, while the delivery routes that enable rapid transmission have been tested and confirmed secure. The timing mechanisms that synchronize revelations across multiple districts are operational, while the backup procedures that ensure message transmission despite potential interference are fully prepared. The academic analysis that provides context for the revelations is complete and ready for immediate distribution. Gentaro adds, while reviewing documents whose intellectual authority could transform scandal into systematic critique of governmental failure, the historical precedents that demonstrate patterns of corruption, the constitutional analysis that reveals violations of fundamental principles, and the philosophical framework that justifies resistance are prepared for coordination, with evidence revelations to maximize political impact. The operation proceeds with clockwork precision until unexpected complications threaten to transform careful planning into desperate improvisation. The guard rotation that should provide entry opportunity arrives 15 minutes early, while additional security personnel appear without explanation, creating circumstances that force real-time adaptation of infiltration plans, whose success depends upon variables that cannot be predicted or controlled through advance preparation. Additional guards approaching from 3 directions. Saburo communicates while seeking concealment in architectural features, whose existence was anticipated but whose adequacy cannot be tested until actual operational conditions create life or death stakes. The timing window is compressed while the extraction route may be compromised, proceeding with document acquisition despite increased risk. But backup plans must be implemented immediately to ensure mission success despite unforeseen complications. Psychological misdirection engaging additional targets. Asagao responds while expanding her manipulation techniques to include multiple officials, whose presence creates both opportunities and dangers for operational security. Priaterge creating administrative crises that requires immediate attention from security personnel, while providing justification for unusual activity patterns. The emotional pressure tactics are exceeding planned parameters, but the situation demands maximum effect despite personal risk exposure. Communication network activating emergency protocols. Yuki confirms while implementing contingency plans that enable coordination, despite operational complications that threaten to disrupt carefully planned timing sequences. Alternative signal methods engaging while backup communication routes prepare for immediate activation. The network structure remains intact despite increased security pressure. But sustained operations require modification of standard procedures. The documents that Saburo obtains during his abbreviated infiltration provide evidence that exceeds even their pessimistic expectations about the scope of corruption within the trade administration. The financial records reveal systematic embezzlement involving dozens of officials and millions of ryo in illegal payments. While correspondence with foreign merchants discusses not merely contraband trade, but actual military intelligence about coastal defenses and troop dispositions that could compromise Japan's security in ways that transcend simple corruption. These documents prove treason, not merely administrative misconduct. Shinsuke declares, while examining evidence whose implications transform their resistance from political opposition into patriotic necessity. The foreign payments include compensation for military intelligence that could enable invasion, while the systematic weakening of coastal defenses creates vulnerabilities that external enemies could exploit. We are not fighting corruption. We are preventing the systematic betrayal of Japan itself. The revelations that follow their carefully coordinated release create political earthquake that shakes the foundations of Bakufu authority, while providing opportunities for broader resistance activities that isolated efforts could never achieve. The evidence appears simultaneously in multiple locations throughout Edo, with scholarly analysis providing intellectual context, while commercial networks ensure widespread distribution despite official attempts at suppression. The governmental response reveals both the extent of corruption and the desperation of those whose criminal activities face exposure. As systematic arrests begin targeting not only resistance members, but also honest officials, whose integrity threatens criminal conspiracies that extend throughout the administrative hierarchy. The purges that follow eliminate many competent administrators, while creating administrative chaos that provides both opportunities and dangers for continued resistance operations. They are arresting anyone whose loyalty might be questionable. Gentaro reports, while observing the systematic elimination of intellectual opposition through academic purges that remove scholars whose research or teaching might inspire critical thinking about governmental policies. The paranoia that drives their response is destroying their own administrative capabilities, while creating popular opposition that our resistance alone could never generate. The commercial networks are experiencing systematic disruption. Yuki observes, while adapting resistance operations to security conditions that eliminate many previously reliable communication methods. But the administrative chaos creates new opportunities for intelligence gathering, while the popular anger about arbitrary arrests provides recruitment possibilities that we must exploit despite increased operational risks. The pleasure quarter intelligence suggests internal conflicts among high-ranking officials. Asagao contributes while maintaining operations despite increased surveillance that makes every client interaction potentially dangerous. The accusations pound counter-accusations about responsibility for security. Failures are creating opportunities for manipulation that could neutralize specific threats while exacerbating governmental instability. The crisis that threatens to destroy everything they have accomplished begins when systematic betrayal within the resistance network leads to the capture of key operatives, whose interrogation provides Bakufu agents with detailed information about organizational structure, communication methods, and planned operations. The arrests that follow demonstrate governmental knowledge that could only come from sources within the resistance itself. While the torture that accompanies interrogations threatens to expose every aspect of their activities. Takeshi Yamamoto was taken 3 days ago, Saburo reports, while examining intelligence that confirms their worst fears about internal security. His interrogation has revealed communication codes, safe house locations, and operational procedures that compromise multiple resistance cells. The betrayal appears systematic rather than forced, suggesting deliberate infiltration rather than captured operatives breaking under torture. The investigation that follows reveals the identity of the traitor whose activities have threatened to destroy the resistance movement from within. Matsuda Ichiro, a trusted courier whose commercial activities provided perfect cover for message transmission between distant cells, had been secretly reporting to Bakufu intelligence while systematically gathering information about resistance capabilities and planned operations. His betrayal extends back months, enabling governmental preparation that explains the increasingly effective counterintelligence operations that have eliminated many resistance networks. The betrayal began before our first coordinated operation. Yuki realizes, while analyzing communication patterns that reveal systematic compromise of security procedures. Every major decision was reported to our enemies, while our operational planning enabled them to prepare countermeasures. We have been fighting an enemy who knew our every move while we remained ignorant of their knowledge. The decision that each resistance member must make involves choosing between personal safety through withdrawal from dangerous activities and continued commitment to causes that may be hopeless while certainly remaining deadly. The choice reflects fundamental questions about duty, honor, and the proper relationship between individual survival and collective welfare that each generation must answer when circumstances test their moral courage. The smart choice is withdrawal. Shinsuke acknowledges while examining tactical assessments that reveal the overwhelming advantages that governmental forces possess. Through superior resources, legal authority, and systematic intelligence about resistance activities, our chances of success have become negligible, while the certainty of death or imprisonment approaches absolute probability. Yet the principles that brought us together remain valid despite the practical impossibility of achieving victory through conventional resistance methods. Withdrawal means abandoning everyone who depends upon our activities. Yuki objects while considering the hundreds of resistance members whose safety depends upon continued coordination and intelligence sharing that only their central organization can provide. The individual cells lack resources for independent operation, while the systematic arrests have eliminated many local leaders whose knowledge enabled effective resistance. Our withdrawal would doom countless people whose only crime was believing that honor matters more than survival. The academic community faces systematic purges that will eliminate intellectual opposition for generations. Gentaro adds, while contemplating the destruction of educational institutions, whose independence enables critical thinking about governmental policies. The scholars who trusted our cause face execution or exile, while the students, whose minds we hoped to influence, will receive only approved doctrine that supports official policies. Our failure means the death of independent thought as well as individual lives. The officials whose cooperation enabled our operations face torture and death regardless of our decisions. Asagao observes, while considering the men whose personal relationships with her provided access to crucial intelligence. Their association with resistance activities has been discovered through the betrayal, while their usefulness to our enemies ended with their exposure. We cannot save them through withdrawal, while our continued resistance might provide opportunities for rescue or revenge. The choice between honorable death and shameful survival has been made for us. Saburo concludes, while examining intelligence reports that reveal the extent of governmental preparation for eliminating organized resistance. They know our identities, our capabilities, and our resources, while their systematic elimination of resistance networks throughout Japan demonstrates commitment to total victory that accepts no compromise. We can die fighting for principles, bet matter, or accept capture that leads to interrogation, torture, and eventual execution after providing information that destroys remaining resistance cells. The final operation that will determine whether their sacrifice serves any purpose beyond personal honor requires infiltrating the Bakufu's central intelligence facility, where captured resistance members await interrogation that will reveal information, enabling the destruction of every remaining opposition network throughout Japan. The mission offers minimal chance of success while ensuring death or capture for anyone who attempts it. Yet the intelligence suggests that systematic torture has not yet extracted the most crucial information from recently captured operatives. Hans Watanabe possesses complete knowledge of resistance networks in 6 provinces. Shinsuke explains while studying architectural plans of the prison facility whose defenses make infiltration nearly impossible. His interrogation would enable Bakufu forces to eliminate organized opposition throughout central Japan, while providing information that could be used to identify resistance sympathizers whose involvement has not yet been discovered. We have perhaps 2 days before torture breaks his resistance. The facility represents the most secure location in Edo, Saburo observes while examining defensive arrangements that reflect centuries of experience in preventing unauthorized access. Multiple guard posts, overlapping patrol routes, structural design that eliminates concealment opportunities, and administrative procedures that require multiple authorizations for any access to prisoner areas. Conventional infiltration approaches cannot succeed while the security measures anticipate every technique that my training provides. The operation requires coordination that exposes all resistance capabilities simultaneously. Yuki realizes, while analyzing resource requirements, that would commit every remaining operative to activities whose failure would eliminate the shadow. Blades as an effective organization. Success demands diversionary attacks that reveal our remaining cells, while extraction procedures that require transportation resources whose provision would expose support networks throughout the commercial district. The psychological warfare necessary for creating opportunities requires burning every intelligence asset whose usefulness depends upon maintaining cover identities. Asagao adds, while contemplating the destruction of relationships that required years to develop and whose loss would eliminate future intelligence capabilities regardless of operational outcome. The manipulation techniques that could provide access to facility personnel required exposing resistance connections that currently provide our only reliable intelligence about governmental activities. The academic justification for such sacrifice requires accepting that principles sometimes demand actions whose practical consequences serve no purpose beyond demonstrating commitment to values that transcend individual survival. Gentoro concludes, while examining philosophical precedents that support decisions whose practical wisdom appears questionable to minds focused on conventional measures of success. The preparation for their final operation takes place during the 3 days that torture gives them before captured resistance members reveal information that would make rescue impossible. The coordination required involves abandoning every security procedure that has enabled their survival, while committing resources whose loss would eliminate future resistance capabilities, even if the mission somehow succeeded beyond all reasonable expectations. Shinsuke's role involves creating diversionaries, attacks that draw security forces away from the prison facility, while his official position provides access to governmental resources that could support extraction procedures if tactical. But opportunities develop despite overwhelming odds against success. The decision to reveal his resistance involvement means abandoning the comfortable security of bureaucratic position for certain death or disgrace, while accepting that his sacrifice might serve no purpose beyond personal honor. The diversionary attacks must appear to threaten targets whose importance exceeds that of individual prisoners. He explains, while examining tactical plans that require precision, timing, and perfect coordination. Castlegate, simultaneous with the rice storehouse. Ammunition depot coordinated with the Foreign Ministry offices. Signal fires that suggest coordinated uprising throughout multiple districts. The illusion of general rebellion must appear credible, enough to justify massive security response despite limited resistance resources. Yuki's workshop becomes the operational center for coordinating activities that span multiple districts, while her commercial network provides communication capabilities that enable unified action despite geographical separation. The textile patterns that have served as coded communications throughout their resistance activities now carry final messages whose meaning will become clear only through actions that follow their transmission. The signal cloths are distributed to 14 different locations. she reports, while supervising preparations that transform her workshop into military command center, despite its civilian appearance. The timing sequences that coordinate simultaneous operations are embedded in delivery schedules that appear routine, while the backup communication methods ensure message transmission despite anticipated government interference. The network will function for this final operation before systematic arrest eliminates our organizational capabilities. Gentaro's academic connections provide intellectual framework that transforms their desperate gambit into principled resistance, whose moral authority could inspire future generations, even if immediate tactical objectives prove impossible to achieve. The documents that he prepares provide historical context that legitimizes actions, whose practical consequences may appear indistinguishable from criminal terrorism to observers lacking proper philosophical understanding. The scholarly analysis that explains our motives must survive regardless of operational outcomes. He observes while preparing manuscripts whose distribution could provide inspiration for future resistance, even if current efforts fail to achieve premediate objectives. The intellectual justification for resistance against systematic corruption must be preserved, while the historical precedents that legitimize opposition to governmental abuse must be documented for posterity. Asagao's final intelligence operation involves extracting crucial information about prison security while creating psychological pressure that could neutralize specific threats during the critical moments when operational success depends upon enemy mistakes or hesitation. The manipulation techniques that she employs require exposing her resistance connections, while accepting that discovery would eliminate capabilities that required years to develop. The guard commander suffers from gambling debts that create vulnerability to financial pressure. She explains while outlining psychological warfare techniques whose effectiveness depends upon intimate knowledge of individual weaknesses. Ki's personal relationships include obligations that could be exploited to ensure cooperation, while his professional ambitions create opportunities for manipulation that might provide tactical advantages during critical moments. Saburo's infiltration plan represents adaptation of conventional techniques to circumstances that exceed the parameters that his training anticipated, requiring improvisation based on fundamental principles rather than specific procedures, whose application assumes operational conditions that their situation does not provide. The approach demands perfect timing, while accepting that failure would result in immediate capture and interrogation that could compromise remaining resistance networks. The entry route requires crossing the castle moat during guard shift changes that create 15-minute windows of reduced surveillance. He explains while examining architectural plans whose details enable planning, despite the obvious impossibility of successful completion. The prisoner extraction demands neutralizing multiple guard posts, while creating escape route that enables movement of unconscious personnel across terrain that conventional evacuation procedures could never navigate. The night of their final operation brings winter's first snow, whose beauty creates poignant contrast with the violence that will either preserve or destroy the last. Organized resistance to systematic corruption that threatens Japan's political and moral foundation. The coordination required for their desperate gambit demands perfect timing, while accepting that failure would mean not merely death, but the elimination of principles, opposition to governmental abuse for the foreseeable future. The diversionary attacks begin precisely at the hour of the rat, when temple bells throughout Edo create acoustic cover for explosions that target government facilities, while creating the illusion of coordinated uprising that forces massive security response. The fires that bloom throughout the commercial district suggest popular rebellion, while the timing of simultaneous incidents creates confusion that provides tactical opportunities for infiltration despite overwhelming defensive advantages. Castle gate diversion successful. Shinsuke reports through communication systems, whose reliability depends upon coordination that their desperate circumstances barely enable. Security forces responding according to predictions, while the ammunition depot explosion creates panic that diverts attention from prison facility. Casualties among government personnel exceed expectations, while resistance losses remain within acceptable parameters for final operation. Commercial district operations proceeding as planned. Yuki confirms while directing activities that span multiple neighborhoods. Despite communication difficulties created by government jamming of signal systems, the signal fires create appearance of general uprising, while textile workshop destruction eliminates evidence of organizational structure. Network coordination continues despite systematic compromise, while operational timeline remains feasible. The infiltration itself tests every aspect of Saburo's training, while demanding improvisation that exceeds the boundaries of conventional technique. As unexpected security modifications force real-time adaptation of penetration plans, whose success depends upon variables that cannot be predicted or controlled through advance preparation. The snow that provides concealment also creates hazards whose consequences could prove fatal if attention to immediate tactical requirements prevents awareness of environmental danger. Prison facility entry achieved despite additional security measures. He communicates while navigating defensive arrangements that reflect recent modifications, specifically designed to prevent the type of infiltration that their operation attempts. Prisoner location confirmed, while guard neutralization proceeds according to modified timeline. Extraction procedures implementing despite structural complications that require alternative route planning. The rescue operation succeeds beyond all reasonable expectations when psychological warfare creates internal conflicts among security personnel, while diversionary attacks force redeployment of forces that should prevent unauthorized access to prisoner areas. The coordination between external pressure and internal infiltration creates opportunities that individual approaches could never achieve, while demonstrating the effectiveness of unified resistance despite overwhelming odds against success. Prisoner extraction complete. Saburo reports while implementing evacuation procedures that require crossing terrain. whose navigation demands skills that conventional military training never provides. Intelligence compromise minimized, while resistance capabilities preserved through successful prevention of systematic interrogation. Operational objectives achieved despite tactical complications that exceeded planning parameters. The aftermath of their successful operation reveals both the potential effectiveness of coordinated resistance and the impossibility of sustaining such activities, given the resources and determination that governmental forces can deploy against organized opposition. The rescued operatives provide intelligence that enables evacuation of many resistance cells, while the demonstration of operational capability inspires renewed resistance activities throughout Japan, despite the obvious risks that such involvement entails. The psychological impact exceeds the tactical significance. Gentaro observes while analyzing reports that describe popular response to evidence that organized resistance remains possible despite systematic governmental efforts to eliminate opposition. The demonstration that principled action can achieve results despite overwhelming odds provides inspiration that creates opportunities for future resistance, even if immediate organizational capabilities have been eliminated. The governmental response will intensify until resistance becomes impossible. Asagao predicts, while considering official reactions, that prioritize the elimination of opposition over administrative efficiency or popular welfare. But the precedent that we have established demonstrates that systematic abuse can be challenged, while the moral authority that principled resistance creates cannot be destroyed through conventional suppression methods. The decision to dissolve the Shadow Blades as an organization, while maintaining the principles that brought them together, reflects recognition that circumstances have changed in ways that make their previous methods both impossible and unnecessary. The network that they created provides foundation for future resistance. While their example demonstrates possibilities for principled action that transcend immediate tactical considerations, individual resistance must replace organizational coordination. Shinsuke concludes, while examining strategic assessments that reveal the futility of attempting to maintain centralized opposition, given governmental capabilities for counterintelligence and systematic suppression. But the principles that guided our coordination remain valid, while the techniques that we developed provide foundation for future activities. When circumstances permit renewed opposition to systematic abuse, the spring that follows the dissolution of the Silent Blade Rebellion brings new growth to gardens damaged by winter's struggles, while the survival of resistance ideals provides hope for eventual reform, even if immediate victory proved impossible. Play the 5 individuals whose coordination transcended social boundaries. Demonstrate possibilities for unity that could serve future generations facing similar challenges to moral courage and political wisdom. Shinsuke returns to his administrative position with understanding that service to legitimate governmental purposes provides more effective resistance to corruption than dramatic opposition that serves personal honor more than practical reform. His influence within the bureaucracy enables gradual changes that serve justice, while his example demonstrates how individual integrity can serve collective welfare through patient work within established institutions. YUKI establishes new commercial relationships that serve honest enterprise, while maintaining capabilities for future resistance activities should circumstances again require coordinated opposition to systematic abuse. Her textile workshop becomes center for cultural activities that preserve traditional values, while creating opportunities for intellectual exchange that could inspire future reform efforts. Gentaro continues his scholarly work with renewed commitment to education that provides intellectual foundation for understanding governmental responsibilities, while inspiring students whose future careers could implement necessary reforms. His academic influence shapes public discourse about constitutional principles, while preserving knowledge that could guide future resistance when circumstances require principled opposition. Asagao transforms her intelligence capabilities into cultural influence that promotes social healing, while maintaining awareness of political developments that could threaten the freedoms that their sacrifice helped preserve. Her artistic accomplishments provide inspiration that transcends immediate political considerations, while demonstrating possibilities for beauty and dignity despite circumstances that could crush spirits lacking proper foundation. Saburo continues, whose intelligence activities as an independent operative whose services enable detection and prevention of corruption, while protecting honest citizens from criminal exploitation. His specialized skills serve justice through individual action, while maintaining readiness for future coordination should organized resistance again become necessary for protecting Japan from systematic abuse. The memory of their coordination echoes through time like temple bells calling faithful to prayer, reminding future generations that duty sometimes requires actions that conventional thinking condemns, while honor demands commitment to principles larger than personal welfare. When circumstances test whether conscience or prudence will guide human choices in moments that determine the direction of history. 5 years later, when cherry blossoms bloom over an Edo that has slowly begun to heal from the wounds that corruption inflicted upon the body politic, former members of the Shadow Blades gather annually at a small shrine dedicated to those who died for principles that matter more than individual survival. The sake that they share carries toasts to fallen comrades, while their prayers seek wisdom for recognizing when future circumstances might again require coordinated resistance to systematic oppression. The changes that their sacrifice helped inspire appear gradually through administrative reforms that eliminate many opportunities for corruption, while establishing procedures for accountability that protect honest citizens from official abuse. The governmental modifications reflect lessons learned about the dangers of systematic corruption, while demonstrating recognition that legitimate authority requires moral foundation that transcends mere efficiency or force. The students who learned from Gentaro's teaching carry forward intellectual traditions that enable critical thinking about governmental responsibilities, while the merchants who benefited from honest commercial practices create economic relationships that serve mutual prosperity rather than exploitative advantage. The cultural expressions that Asagao's influence helped inspire demonstrate possibilities for beauty and dignity that make life worth defending, while the security that Saburo's activities provide enables ordinary people to pursue happiness without fear of criminal exploitation. The annual memorial service concludes with readings from classical texts that explore the relationship between individual duty and collective welfare, while the incense smoke carries prayers for Japan's continued prosperity under governance that serves justice, rather than merely rewarding those clever enough to exploit systematic weakness. The participants depart with renewed commitment to principles that their younger selves thought might require dramatic sacrifice, but which maturity has revealed can often be served through patient dedication to honest work within legitimate institutions. The final words that echo through the shrine courtyard return to eternal themes that give human struggle meaning beyond immediate success or failure. The loyalty that transcends personal interest. The courage that serves others despite personal risk. The wisdom that distinguishes between necessary action and mere gesture. And the hope that future generations will prove worthy of the sacrifices made on their behalf, like snow that falls silently through winter darkness to create beauty that dawn reveals. These 5 souls demonstrated how individual courage can serve collective welfare when circumstances demand principled action. Despite overwhelming odds against success, their story provides inspiration for all who face the choice between comfortable compromise and dangerous virtue, when fate tests whether wisdom and honor matter more than security and survival. Thus ends the tale of the Silent Blade Rebellion, when 5 hearts beat as one through autumn's testing to preserve possibilities for justice in a world that seemed determined to sacrifice principle for convenience. Their courage creating foundations that support future generations, seeking to build societies worthy of human dignity and divine blessing.